There once was a time where GW2 WvW was a fun experience. It was very including, roamers were everywhere, big guilds were playing with each other, there was servers with server communities and events were happening. Everything was pretty cool until ANet started to think, hey, let's fix it. And before you go, who the heck are you? Well, I've been playing GW2 since release basically, with a couple of breaks in between. I've been playing WvW more or less daily since POF. And I've streamed WvW and PvP 3 times a week on Twitch since 2020. And I used to be very optimistic about the restructuring and alliances in general until now. So what we were promised? We were promised alliances, a rework of the guild system. We were promised better matchups based on performance the week before. No more tiers, an algorithm would take care of the matches as per better matchups. Little to no matchup manipulation because moving servers would be locked down, and a revamped UI and updated API. What we got was no alliances because the system was shelved, aka ANet speedfoot dropped, but players decided to use the current guild system for a scuffed alliances clone, a system that isn't geared for that kind of interaction between guilds. And because of this, the matchups are now based on the whole guild's performance, from the high performers to those who AFK and only play 2 hours a week, which turns out to be very average. We still have tiers, 1 up, 1 down, because no algorithm was implemented, at least not one we know of. And basically we now have free server transfers every 4 weeks at most, instantly if we can persuade customer service into moving you. Less manipulation, sure, but it's still fairly easy to place alts in certain matchups and manipulate them. Lack of UI updates, and we still got menus with duplicate information. API have been very sparsely updated, but there's still no way of telling A, who selected a certain guild as their WvW guild, and B, what team you're on based on team ID through the API. The last part would be particularly useful, so players that don't have big alliance, guild, whatever, as WvW guild don't take up a space in an already full guild. There's also a big element of hard-coded IDs to names going on right now, which is far from optimal as these things change. So what we essentially have right now is a lot of players in large or full guilds taking up a big chunk of the population of a shard, which is a server in the old system. Some teams even have big guilds stacked together where a working algorithm should have placed them in the opposite teams. This means blob v blob v blob fights with all the things that comes with that. High ping, skill lag, no FPS. So unless you're part of this blob, you're going to be run over by 50 plus players looking for content. We have renamed servers, now teams, but the teams change every 4 weeks when they are shaking up. Based on what? Nobody knows. The server communities have been blown into pieces because now you have to pick a WvW guild to make sure you play with the same players. If you have a regular WvW guild for prime time but enjoy the same public commanders during daytime or weekends, you now have to sort to a big alliance like WvW guild, back to problem 1. You also have to convince your daytime or weekend commanders to join this guild. If they don't, you'll have to make a choice but basically give up 50% of what you enjoy. This shouldn't be necessary. Although we did gain some slight hope when Roy proposed a new scoring system with slight changes to such things as points scored for kills, which normally rewards 2 points. It would now reward 3 points because according to ANet's own calculations, it didn't make much of a difference. Another feature in this new system was also going to be off-hours rewards, where the changes suggested was to reward more points for structures during primetime matches and normal-ish points during off-hours. This system ran for full 4 weeks until it was reverted because it caused too many issues, especially on NA servers where the diversity of time zones is larger than on EU servers, with especially Oceanic players who needed to vastly reschedule their raids if they wanted to be part of prime time. On top of all this, we now have much longer queues at prime time, which is just amplified during WvW rush events, where players who don't normally play WvW queue up for those gifted battles. it is arguably worse than what we had before, all hidden behind a cloak called "it's a live beta." One could argue that if players didn't gather up into large server guilds, the matches would be much better and a large chunk of the shards wouldn't be taken up by large guilds, but ANet should have taken this into account when they made the system go live. It shouldn't come as a surprise, especially now that the system has been running for a good while. Right now, it is much harder, if not impossible, to get new players into WvW because they can't drop in and play with their friends. They have to go through a loop of choices to be able to play, select a WvW guild, one they might even have to become a member of in the first place, which also takes time. Then select the correct team if they're able to. 99% of the time they won't be able to because the team creation locks, which could potentially be 4 weeks away. 4 weeks is a long time to wait if you just want to play with your friends. Personally, I wouldn't hold it against ArenaNet if they went, "Hey guys, we've run some tests and compared to the old system and this isn't working. We can take some experiences and port them into the old system to make some changes, but restructuring is also scrapped for the time being." Admitting a mistake isn't the worst thing. We learn something new every day. But ArenaNet have taken a well-polished system, one of the most well-polished server versus server or versus server modes in MMORPGs, and turned it into something worse because of the fundamentals that have not been delivered. Sure, it does feel old and less loved, and we haven't had a new map since 2015. Replacing Alpine Borderland or deleting Desert would probably be preferable, and fixing Edge of the Mist so it doesn't feel like a lost pocket in time would probably also be a good idea. It's gone through too many iterations from idea to execution. The betas were promising as we only tested small parts of the system, but there's no coherence, no community besides your WvW guild. And everything I've just mentioned just shows that large WvW guilds ruin the fun and make bad matchups. Of course, the solution is to split up into smaller guilds, but then players have a fundamental feeling that they're not playing with their friends anymore, and everything is closed in very small loops. It also very much ruins roaming. You also have the fact that when it's blob, it basically comes down to who has the most pools, who can cheat out the most ability, who can generate skill lag. It basically comes down to that. Thank you, ANet, for ruining WvW.